Jungkook felt his entire world shatter in an instant. The words hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless. His ears rang, his vision blurred, and for a moment, he felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. What? His voice cracked, barely able to process the words. The doctor sighed. It's in the early stages, and that's the good news. It means it's treatable. But she needs immediate medical attention treatment. Monitoring. We don't know if she was even aware of it herself. Jungkook staggered back, his knees nearly giving out as Jimin and Taehyung caught his arms. His mind was spinning. How could this be happening? Why? His YN, the woman he had spent so much time pushing away, had been carrying something so heavy without anyone knowing. He swallowed hard, his hands trembling. She didn't say anything. She never told me. His voice was barely above a whisper. She may not have known yet, the doctor said gently. Right now, our immediate concern is her recovery from the accident. But once she wakes up, we need to discuss the next steps. Jungkook nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He felt completely powerless. First, he almost lost her because of the accident, and now, he was faced with the terrifying reality that he could lose her again. Jimin placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Jungkook, she's strong. If anyone can get through this, it's her. Jungkook closed his eyes, letting out a shaky breath. No. He wasn't going to let this happen. He wasn't going to let her go through this alone. He had already made too many mistakes, pushed her away too many times. This time, he was going to fight for her. He turned to the doctor, his voice filled with quiet determination. When can I see her? The doctor hesitated for a moment before nodding. She's still unconscious, but you can see her now. Just be careful. She's weak. Jungkook followed the doctor down the sterile hallways, his legs heavy with the fear of what he might see. When they reached her room, he stepped inside quietly, his breath hitching when he saw her lying there, connected to machines, her body still and lifeless in the bed. But she was alive. He stepped to her side, taking her hand gently, his eyes filling with fresh tears as he whispered her name. Why? I'm here. I won't leave you. Please just wake up, please. He kissed her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, a small reassurance that she was still with him. But the fear remained. Every part of him ached, regret settling deeper into his chest. I love you, he whispered, his voice breaking. I love you. And I'm sorry. I should have never let you go. I'll spend every day making it right if you just wake up. Please. Author's POV. Jungkook sat by YN's bedside, his fingers intertwined with hers, afraid that if he let go, she would slip away from him. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, grief, regret, fear. The image of her body lying on the cold pavement, lifeless and unmoving, replayed in his head like a nightmare. But nothing could have prepared him for the doctor's words. Cancer. She had been silently battling something so cruel, and he hadn't even known. He had spent so much time pushing her away, letting his pride and bitterness cloud the way he truly felt about her. Now, all those wasted moments clawed at his heart like a tormenting reminder of how much time he had lost, time he might never get back. Jimin and Taehyung stood quietly at the foot of the bed, their faces filled with worry. Jimin was the first to break the silence, his voice low but firm. Jungkook, have you ever noticed anything off about her before? Any signs? Jungkook shook his head, his throat tight. No. I mean, she looked tired sometimes, but I thought it was just work stress. His voice cracked and he clenched his jaw. I never thought she was hiding something like this. Taehyung sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. She's strong. Too strong for her own good sometimes. Jungkook's grip on Hyen's hand tightened. He didn't deserve her strength. Not after the way he had treated her. The memory of his last encounter with her, before the accident, burned in his mind. He had been cold, distant, still bitter about her rejecting him. He had wanted to make her feel the pain he felt, not realizing she was already enduring something far worse. He ran a hand through his messy hair before looking up at his best friends, his gaze sharp. "But I need your help." Hymin and Taeyoung exchanged a glance before stepping closer. "What is it?" Hymin asked, his voice serious. Jungkook took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "This wasn't just some random accident," he said, his voice low but filled with anger. "I need you two to find out who's behind it. I want names, I want details, I don't care what it takes." Taeyoung's expression darkened. "You think someone did this on purpose?" Jungkook's jaw tightened. "I don't think I know." His grip on Hyen's hand tightened slightly as his eyes burned with fury. She was rushing to the hospital because of her mom. Someone knew she was vulnerable. Someone planned this. "I need to know who." Hymin sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We'll look into it, Jungkook. But you need to focus on her right now. I'm not going to sit here and do nothing while the person responsible walks free." Jungkook snapped, his voice thick with emotion. Taeyoung placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll handle it, Jungkook. Trust us. Whoever did this is going to pay." Jungkook finally nodded, his shoulders dropping slightly. "Thank you," he muttered. Hymin and Taeyoung shared one last glance before stepping out of the room, already making calls. Jungkook exhaled shakily and turned his gaze back to Hyen. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "I swear, Hyen," he whispered, his voice filled with both love and determination. "I'll make sure you're safe. And I'll never let anything happen to you again." He pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, his heart aching as he watched her sleep, praying she would wake up soon. Jungkook's puffy days felt like weeks as I sat by her bedside. Each day I held her hand, my thumb tracing the smoothness of her skin, hoping that somehow she could feel me. I spent hours just staring at her pale face, her fragile body hooked up to machines. Every time I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I reminded myself that I had to stay strong. For her, the doctors had said she was stable, but her body needed time to heal. Her heart rate was steady now, and the tubes had been removed from her chest, but she still hadn't opened her eyes. I couldn't help but wonder if she would. I whispered to her every day, not caring if anyone heard. I wasn't worried about appearances anymore. Not when it came to her. "I'm so sorry, Hyen," I muttered under my breath, my voice trembling. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I know I did. But I love you. Please wake up. Please forgive me." Every time I said those words, I felt a weight lift off my chest. But it didn't last. I would watch the rise and fall of her chest, waiting, praying for any sign that she could hear me. The guilt was suffocating. I leaned down one day and kissed her forehead, my lips lingering for a moment. "Please, Hyen, come back to me. I need you." And yet, still, there was no response. The silence in the room was deafening, and I couldn't escape the pain gnawing at my insides. Jungkook's mom's POV. I watched my son every day as he sat in that sterile hospital room. His face was haggard, his eyes sunken from lack of sleep. It broke my heart to see him like this. But at the same time, I couldn't help but admire the depth of his feelings for Hyen. He had always been so guarded, so focused on his work, but with her, he was different. I could see the way he looked at her, the way he cried for her, and the way he whispered his apologies. hoping for a miracle. I had my doubts about YN at first, wondered if she was just another person in his life, another distraction. But after seeing him like this, I realized how much she meant to him. I had seen my son lose himself before, when he lost his first love, when he thought he couldn't carry the weight of his responsibilities. But this was something else entirely. YN wasn't just someone he cared about. She was the person who had captured his heart. And I could see that now. "Jungkook," I said softly as I entered the room. "She's going to wake up. I know it's hard, but you have to believe that." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can ever make it right, Mom. I've done too much damage." I pushed her away. I let myself. I hurt her. I moved to his side, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Jungkook, you're a human. You make mistakes. But it's how you handle those mistakes that matter. And you're here now. You're showing her how much she means to you. That's what counts." He nodded, wiping his eyes, and I could see the weight slowly lifting from his shoulders. "I'll be here," I promised him. "We'll all be here." As I watched Jungkook sitting by YN's side, his eyes never leaving her face, I couldn't help but smile softly to myself. This was the son I knew, the one who had always kept his emotions locked away from the world, now completely vulnerable in the presence of this woman. YN was a breath of fresh air in his life, though it hadn't always been easy. I had my doubts about her at first, mostly because of the things I had heard, and because I didn't want to see him hurt again. But now, watching them together, I saw something different. Jungkook was broken without her, and it was clear that she had become more than just someone to pass the time with. She was his heart. I couldn't help but admire her from where I stood. YN was beautiful in a way that was different from anyone Jungkook had ever been with. Not that I had seen him with many women before, but there was something about her. She was delicate but strong, her features serene yet powerful. Her beauty wasn't just skin deep, it was in the way she carried herself, the way she loved him even when he didn't deserve it. I leaned closer to Jungkook, a playful grin forming on my lips. "You know," I teased, lightly nudging him, "she's beautiful, don't you think?" Jungkook's face flushed, and he gave me a quick, almost embarrassed look. "Yeah, Mom, I know." I chuckled, unable to resist. "I always knew your type was exotic. But YN? She's something else." Jungkook's eyes widened, and he shot me a quick glance before looking back at YN. "Mom, stop." I laughed at his discomfort, feeling a lightness in the air. It was nice to see him this way again. For so long, he had been so focused on the weight of the world, on the pressures of his company and his responsibilities. Seeing him so human, so vulnerable, it made me proud. But I could tell he was trying to keep it together, especially in front of me. He didn't want to show too much emotion, didn't want to reveal too much of his feelings, especially not in front of his mother. I reached out, gently smoothing a lock of hair from YN's face. "She's special, Jungkook, and I can see why you care about her so much." Jungkook glanced down, his lips pressing into a thin line, unsure of how to respond. The guilt and uncertainty were still heavy in his eyes. But I knew him well enough to understand that he was already thinking ahead, making plans to do whatever it took to fix the damage he'd caused. I smiled softly, squeezing his shoulder. "She'd be all right. I can feel it." But even as I spoke the words, I couldn't help but wonder what YN would think when she woke up. Would she forgive him? Would she see past his mistakes? Would she even want him after everything that had happened? I only hoped that YN was as strong as she seemed, and that when the time came, she would be able to find it in her heart to forgive him. Because Jungkook needed her more than he would ever admit.